In this video, we'll use Lightroom Mask to create a dark and moody edit that's going to make a more appealing image and tell a better story. Let's dive in. After throwing the image into Topaz Photo AI for denoise and sharpening, I'm going to make an 8x10 crop, and now we have our starting point. So we're going to begin making a couple global adjustments, meaning that they will affect the whole image. We're going to start in color grading, and I like to take the mid-tone luminance up a little bit. Here we're about 29. You can see if I bump it up the whole way, or I drop it down the whole way, you can see what it does to those mid-tone colors. So even though we're going to make stuff a lot darker, I think that bumping up the mid-tones is going to help out. And we're going to make a couple other global adjustments here. We're going to take the contrast down just a tad. That's going to help with a moody look that we're going to be creating. And then I want to bring up the vibrance just a tad to help those softer colors. So now it's time to start working on a mask. So we'll begin with a subject mask. Now this is a pretty messy image. There's a lot going on in the background, and this is a brown deer in kind of a brown and orange environment. So whenever I turn on show overlay, you can see that Lightroom kind of did struggle to find the exact subject. It's spilling out beyond the subject quite a bit there. And I understand, it's a busy image. These kinds of shots this typically happens with. But we're going to subtract using a brush from this mask. So let's go ahead and click subtract brush. And now what I'm going to do is kind of bump up the size and the feather of my mask. I'm going to keep it kind of small. And I'm just going to take my time and brush the edges here to eliminate any kind of spill that we have. Okay, now that we have a nice clean mask for our subject, we're going to begin to burn him a little bit, meaning we're going to take the exposure down. I'm going to take the highlights down, and this might not absolutely be necessary, but we are going to add a little bit of light later. So I just want to make sure that I'm not going to blow out those whites. And then I'm going to take the shadows down, trying to make the darker areas of the subject down there just a little bit darker. And again, we're going to be adding to this more as we go along. We're going to add a linear gradient that we're going to bring up from the bottom, allowing it to touch the deer. This is going to be a burn, and I'm also going to bring the highlights down because I don't want anything down there that's light to be popping through the dark that we're creating with this mask. Now let's add a linear gradient burn, bringing it down from the top, and I am going to subtract the subject. Now it's not going to subtract the exact subject mask that we have already created, but that's okay because we're just kind of creating general light here. So it is going to get rid of a little bit, but not exactly what we had eliminated before, and I'm okay with that. There was light coming in from this right side right there. So this is just kind of flowing it all around. I'm going to angle it so the sun is kind of angling down, and that's looking pretty good right about there. Now, I think that we are going to maybe take the shadows down a little bit just to kind of make it a little bit darker. We're going to add yet another linear gradient, bringing it in from the left where the sun was not. We're burning again, and we're going to subtract the subject so that we're not affecting the subject. It's only affecting the background for right now, as you can see there with the overlay. We're going to darken up the exposure quite a bit and take the highlights down. And let's take the shadows down quite a bit as well. And we're going to take the whites down a little bit too, and you're really starting to see contrast between the right and the left. We're going to continue to build masks around the deer. You can't have too many, but we're going to continue to layer to make the scene darker. Now we'll make the bottom of the screen a lot darker, and we're going to do this by duplicating and inverting the subject mask. So now we'll intersect the mask with a linear gradient. So this is going to allow us to draw up and not affect the subject, the deer, at all. Now we're going to plummet the exposure. We're just going to take it way down here, and then we'll take the shadows down as well. Now we're really creating a dark area in the bottom of the image. As I said before, the light was coming in right here, and this is one of my favorite little tricks. We want to preserve the idea that the light was coming from that way. So what we're going to do is duplicate the subject mask and intersect it with a brush. Now by doing this, we're only going to be brushing on the subject, the deer, and we're going to dodge. So we're going to add some light. I'm going to adjust my brush, leave the feathering relatively large, maybe make the brush just a little bit smaller here. And now what we're going to do is just paint on some light on that right side of the deer. By turning the layer on and off, you can see the difference. We added a lot of subtle light there to the right side where the sun would have been coming in. Now we're going to do the opposite to the other side of the deer. So again, we're going to copy the subject mask and intersect the mask with a brush. But this time, whenever we brush, we're going to burn to create the dark contrast where the light wasn't hitting the subject. We're going to drop the exposure a significant amount, bump down the shadows on the deer, and take down the highlights just a bit. Now I'm still seeing a little bit too much light on that left side, so we're going to take care of that in just a minute. But before we do that, let's add some light coming in from the top right side, and we're going to do that with a radial gradient. We're going to feather it completely, that way it's nice and soft, with no defined hard middle. Let's bump up the exposure slightly. So let's make it just a little bit warmer, right there. We'll make a second radial gradient, and we're going to elongate it a little bit there and rotate it. Our goal here is to make that area behind the deer's neck a little bit darker. Pretty good right there. Take the exposure down. And we're going to subtract the subject. So now that area is only affecting the background. We'll dip the shadows down a bit. Take the highlights down again. Get rid of that brighter area. And let's make yet another radial gradient. We're going to bring it in from the side again, trying to just darken that area right there. That looks pretty good. So we're burning. We're going to subtract the subject. And then let's dip down the highlights. Take the whites down a bit and even the exposure. So that's giving us a nice shadow. And we're really, with that radial gradient, blending the other linear gradients that we had created earlier. As I'm looking at the image, I want to go back to this mask and stretch it down just a little bit further here. And that is still not going to affect the deer at all. We're only affecting the background. And let's take the shadows down just a little bit more. We'll dip the exposure just a little bit more. So one final adjustment that we're going to make, we're going to zoom in on the image and we're going to create a new brush and use the Iris Enhance. There are no catch lights to speak of, but I do want to enhance the eyes just a little bit, maybe to brighten them up so they'll be a little bit more obvious in the image. And there you have it. We took a boring flat image and made the light much more dynamic using Lightroom Mask. Hey, I hope you're able to add some of these techniques into your editing process. If you enjoyed the video and you want more, please subscribe and be sure to check out this video for more tips and tricks. I'll see you there.